Sellers, you're going to want to listen up because you could be doing this and killing your deal. Welcome to another episode of Home Staging TV. I'm your host, Tori Toth. Today, I have a very special guest with me who is an associate broker here in the Queens area. And we're going to talk to you today about selling your house during the COVID pandemic. But first, here's your Marketing Minute with Bobby McGrath and Tracy Melendi.
Today's topic, professionally staged versus professionally assisted. So professionally staged would encompass that vacant property where the staging company is bringing in all the art and decor. It could be your occupied home client who's going to stay in the property but just needs help showcasing those rooms, moving the furniture around, figuring out what to pre-pack and move out. And those homes may just need a few things brought in. So it could be an accessory rental package into that occupied home.
Absolutely. And then you also, with the advent of reality TV, a lot of times you're going to have clients who want to give it a shot, right? However, they do not have the information they need to do a true staging. This is when professionally assisted comes in handy, the consultation. So if it's an occupied consultation, the stager can come in, and again, the stager is an expert, someone who knows the things they didn't know they needed to know. They can come in and give that advice that will help them present strong from day one.
And that's your Marketing Minute.
Today, I wanted to welcome Susanne Gutermuth. She's an associate broker of Douglas Elliman out of Queens. And welcome, Susanne. Thank you so much for joining us on Home Staging TV.
Hi, Tori. Thank you for having me.
So I saw that you spoke of a very interesting topic the other day on Facebook, and I wanted to kind of talk about that again here because it was so important for home sellers to know this. But first of all, I mean, have you ever been in a situation like what COVID-19 has found you in terms of the real estate market?
Never. This is a very unprecedented and new situation for everybody. And while we're all cooped up in the houses, it's really very important, I think, to learn new things and stay ahead of the curve because nobody knows what the market is going to be like when we get out of this. There are so many different theories how it might be, but I know that the agents that are acquiring all these new skills right now and are really thinking ahead, I think they're going to be still successful, while others that just think that everything is going to stay the way it was before this hit are going to have a very hard time. But now, complete first for me.
And how has the market been for you since COVID hit the New York City area?
It's been interesting. So I'm based out of Queens, and when we first were put under quarantine, in the beginning, they actually declared agents as non-essential. So we were completely grounded. Everybody was in shock. And everything froze. So nobody was doing any deals. The boards, the co-op boards were not doing any interviews. Everything was completely shut down. And then after a couple of weeks, it started to thaw a little bit. And buyers started to reach out again. And they were like, well, can I still buy? Am I still qualified? What's going on with the banks? So there was a lot of reshuffling because the banks were tightening all the lending guidelines. And even though now agents were declared essential, we're still, to this day, it's now May 28th, we're not allowed to do any showings in person. So everything has completely switched around, but the buyers still want to buy, and there's still sellers that have to sell. Usually the sellers that are on the market now are the ones that have to sell and are very motivated. So yeah. It's starting to thaw.
Yes, I am definitely one of those sellers myself. My house is currently on the market. So what have you found that has been kind of killing deals throughout this process?
Well, definitely the banks and buyers losing jobs or getting furloughed, or also taking a hit on their credit, with people not having a job and not getting unemployment for a long time, now living on credit cards because there might not be enough reserves, or if they had reserves in the bank, they're now using it instead of a down payment, they're using it to live on. So there were a lot of deals that might have already been in contract that fell out of contract because of this. And then also what affects the deals a lot is that we are not allowed to show in person. We're not really bonding with the buyers when we're doing the showing, and of the way showings are done right now.
So talk about that. How are you actually showing houses at this point?
So it depends whether the house is empty or occupied. If the house is empty, I can go in the house with my camera and I can do showings where I'm Zooming or WhatsApping or FaceTiming buyers that are at home usually. So we usually do virtual tours on everything now. And then if they want a showing in person, virtually, we go into the apartments or houses and film them live.
So when people are inside the home, though, how do you show these houses?
When people are inside the home, then a buyer and a seller can connect together with each other. So I would have to give the phone number of the buyer to the seller. The seller calls the buyer directly and organizes a showing, because we are not allowed to actually arrange for showings, only the seller themselves. So a lot of times now we have to put the buyer and the seller together for that showing, and the showing is done by the seller directly without us agents present.
I mean, is that out of protocol? Because a lot of times people never wanted the buyer and seller meeting. So what is that kind of like?
It's definitely out of protocol, because what I've observed, I've done thousands and thousands of showings, and sometimes before COVID, a seller wanted to actually stay present at an open house or at a showing, and that almost always was a minus, because buyers, when a seller is there, they're not going to really show their cards. They're going to keep the poker face. They now think they have to either impress the seller, or they have to not show at all that they like the house, because they think they'll get a better price if they point out the negatives. And they're also going to feel less free to actually open the closets and picture themselves in the space, because if the seller is present, they will feel like a guest in the house, and they will not picture themselves as actually living there. So that, even before the coronavirus mandates, was a problem. So now you don't even have an agent there to run interference. So a lot of buyers will go in and ask all kinds of questions, trying to probe about the motivation of the seller. Have they found anything yet? When are they looking to move? What's their bottom line? How motivated are they? And then sellers, a lot of times, will just go bloop and divulge everything, and basically, give the buyers a lot of ammunition for the negotiations.
So what should sellers know when they're showing their houses to these buyers?
Well, first of all, they should really, all questions that are being asked that don't have anything to do with the house per se, they should just say, just talk to my agent about that. If the sellers are comfortable, I would actually recommend for the seller to maybe stay in the corridor and just let the buyers roam around, so that the buyers can feel as if they're alone in the house as much as possible. And they should also know that the buyer is there to get a deal. And a buyer really, in this time, a buyer would not come out and see a house in person unless they've already decided, and they're pretty positive from the pictures, the virtual tour, maybe the showing on camera, that this is really a house they like. So there's not going to be any lookers that are going out just for sport. So let's go see an open house. Those buyers already have decided they really like the house. So as a seller, play it close to the chest. Don't give away too much. Make sure your house is really clean, smells good. Some sellers actually are already opening the closets before, so that the buyers don't have to touch doorknobs, and everything is already open.
That's an interesting point right there. And obviously, try and get either a staging expert in there or a staging consultant, so you know how to prepare your home for sale. What should these sellers be saying? Do you have a phrase that they should be saying if they're caught in a situation that they don't know how to get out of with the buyer?
There's two phrases that they can say, oh, I will get back to you on that. Let me find out, which is actually one of my favorite phrases, even as an agent. We sometimes get caught in situations where we're not sure what to say. You always say, let me get back to you on that. And then the agent will go back to the buyers. And then also another thing, that if the sellers feel uncomfortable, they can always say, oh, just talk to my agent about that. So those are, I would say, the two weapons in the arsenal that will keep bad questions or situations at bay.
So always defer back to you guys, the
Yes.
experts.
Yes,
Love
exactly.
that. What about on the other spectrum? So for buyers, if they're caught in a situation, because you mentioned, sellers like to go down memory lane with buyers, and they could end up staying there for longer than they want to, and maybe they don't even like the house anymore. So what can buyers do if they're caught in a situation like that?
Yeah, so for buyers, one thing that I would recommend is they might actually have their agents with them virtually on the phone. And that way, if the buyer is too close and stays too much on top of them and talks too much, they can just say, oh, if you don't mind, can we have a little bit of privacy, because I want to talk with my agent. So in a way, you're still keeping the agent there with you as a buffer. And the buyers can also just say, listen, we would like to just visualize ourselves in the house. Would you mind giving us a little bit of privacy, if it's not too much to ask? And just be very polite. I also, when I have buyers that are going into houses now with direct showings with the sellers, I ask the listing agent if they have coached their seller, and if they could please give privacy to the buyers as much as possible.
And you mentioned you actually coach sellers ahead of time too.
Yes, absolutely. For sellers, a lot of sellers, it's also very uncomfortable during this time. First of all, people are worried about COVID. So if a buyer and the seller are doing the showing, of course they have to wear the masks, have the gloves, booties. I give my sellers booties for the shoe protections, and so you absolutely have to coach the sellers in order to make it a little bit more comfortable. Yeah.
Yes, showing them like what should be highlighted, what maybe you don't want them to see.
Yes, exactly. I walk with them through the house virtually, and I tell them, where they should stand in every room. If they decide they are not comfortable having the buyers in the house by themselves, I tell them where to stand. And I also tell them, which lights to put on. At this time, I actually think staging is more important than ever, if possible, because, we even have to overcome buyers feeling uncomfortable in a new space that's not familiar, with COVID in the back of their heads. So we have even less chances to make them fall in love with it emotionally. So you really that house needs to look so good, like it never did before.
And so do you have any other best practices when it comes to showing a home?
There are different styles of showing a house. It depends, or an apartment. It depends on the personality of the buyers. So some buyers really want you there as a friend, and other buyers, they really don't want to hear anything out of your mouth. They really just want to go through it themselves and feel the space. So it depends on the personalities of the buyers. I like to stay behind the buyers when I show a property and let them go in first, so they don't see my backside first when they go into a room. So that's very important. Always let people enter a room first and you go last.
Which makes total sense, because first impressions count, right?
Exactly.
And so you want them to see the actual features of the house and see what they're actually getting and the lifestyle that they can lead. What do you think is going to happen from here on out? Do you think this is now going to be the way that certain people show houses? Do you think everything will go back to normal? What's kind of your take?
I do believe that there's definitely going to be a lot of changes. I think that virtual showings are here to stay. And I think that a lot of sellers are probably going to want a virtual showing first before they let buyers into the house, even when agents are allowed back in there again. I also believe that open houses where we had 30, 40, 50 people coming through a house within 1 hour are probably a thing of the past, which was actually, they were great for selling a property because you know, the buyers were feeling the urgency, and then a lot of times you get multiple offers. So I think now more than ever, it's important that the house looks good if you don't have that stampede coming through the house, and the buyers now don't feel that urgency anymore. But yes, I think that virtual showings are definitely here to stay. Yeah.
Well, these were some valuable tips that you shared with us today. I want to thank you so much for joining me. And if anyone is looking to contact Susanne, I'll put her information down below. You help everyone in the New York City area, correct?
I do. I go from Manhattan all the way into Nassau. And I have strategic partners really all over the US. So wherever somebody has any questions, I can help.
And if you guys have any questions about selling your property, you can go ahead and put those in the comments below. Don't forget to go watch this video next for more home tips. And don't forget to subscribe to Home Staging TV channel as well. Until next time, happy selling.